Okay, thank you. I want to welcome all of you who have joined us today. Thank you for taking the time to participate in our little session with Simon Kaminetsky. Just to give you a little background, Simon serves as the Director of Philanthropic Initiatives at the Greater Miami Jewish Federation. In that capacity, he works with major donors as a trusted philanthropic advisor, matching their philanthropic goals with organizations and programs beyond the annual campaign. Simon has a 4-decade history as a Jewish communals professional, having worked in Metro West New Jersey and New York City federations. And prior coming to Miami 15 years ago, he served as the International Director of the Israel Cancer Research Fund. In recent years, he has been a consultant to a number of federation agencies on capital campaign initiatives. And if I might add, he has been a friend for at least 45 years. I'm not even sure. We're in West Orange 50 years, so I'm not sure how many years we've been friends. But I will now, and I see others are joining now also. Harry just joined us all. But Simon, why don't you go ahead and start your presentation.
And I'm just going to take one moment to make sure that I have enough battery, which I see I didn't do. I'll be right with you.
Okay. For those of you who are just joining, Harry and Saul, we were having trouble with the video part, which you probably have noticed. And we tried to correct it and we could not. So we decided with Simon's permission to go ahead and start his presentation since it already is 1:15. So Simon.
Great. Okay, I'm back. Thank you. I wanted to say as we begin that I was really looking forward. I am really looking forward to our discussion this afternoon for 2 reasons. One, I was really flattered that Dory reached out to me. As she mentioned, we go back many years in West Orange, New Jersey. I also am looking forward to it because capital campaign has turned out to be one of the things, one of the responsibilities I've had over the past 10 years in Miami that has really energized and inspired me. I had never done a capital campaign prior to 10 years ago. And one of our local agencies, the Miami Beach JCC, was at a critical juncture with a capital campaign, and it was about to go flat. And they came to the Federation, and I became an executive on loan. And I spent 18 months conducting a $15 million capital campaign to build their JCC. And then I went on to a $25 million campaign to build a Hillel house on the University of Miami campus. And most recently, I worked on completing a rather significant campaign to build a cultural arts center at the Michael M. Russell JCC in Aventura. The reason why I like capital campaign and I'm excited for you in your endeavor is a capital campaign has a defined beginning, middle, and end. So for me professionally, I like those 3 steps. But it's also something that's very concrete. So much of what we do fundraising for, we don't necessarily see the result. We don't see it immediately, and we don't always have the product in front of us. And one of the exciting things about a capital campaign is being able to help people envision something, to give them a vision, and to make them a part of the process. So I know this afternoon, and I'm going to share my notes with you after this session, I'm going to be raising a lot of questions and issues that I'm going to ask you to think about, primarily things that I don't know about your community, the history of your synagogue, and some of your goals. And some of the questions that you'll probably ask me at the end of my presentation will help me better define how I might be able to be helpful to you. This afternoon, what I really want to do is to explore how we set the tone within the community and the synagogue, and build a momentum for you to have a successful capital campaign. And while I believe you're at a really exciting time launching this campaign, it needs to be carefully laid out. You're going to be conducting a feasibility study of sorts that will need to be conducted so that the dream of this new, beautiful, comfortable space can be realized. So I have like 10 or 12 points that I wanted to mention to you. Perhaps you'll jot down notes that when I send you my outline, you'll be able to fill in, and then we'll take it from there in subsequent discussions. First is the importance of goal setting. Determining what the goal of the campaign is. What do you need to raise for construction, for the furnishing of the facility, and the maintenance of the facility? Many organizations, when they conduct a capital campaign, they don't think about what's going to happen once your synagogue is open. What funds will you need to have so that if after the construction there's an issue with the roof in 5 years, or there's an issue with the air conditioning system, it's best in the goal to put those contingencies into the campaign so those monies are ready for you. Once you set the goal of what you need to raise, we can develop what I call a campaign case for giving. To be able for the solicitors to have the knowledge and something eventually in writing. Why is this campaign important? What will a new or a building mean for the future of the synagogue and for the future of the community at large? And in developing that, what might be at risk if you did not move forward? If you decided to stay where you are and not do the construction, the renovation of a facility, what would be at risk? The numbers of people that you could bring into the congregation, and not having appropriate space for classes and functions, and not also being a synagogue that will attract new people moving to Florida who might not select your community if there is not a viable, comfortable synagogue. Next is to create a leadership structure, an individual or individuals whose sole responsibility will be to chair the campaign and to help to bring together a solicitation team, women and men who will conduct the actual solicitations, who will go out and ask people to join them in this mitzvah. And it's important, and I'm going to probably refer to this 2 or 3 times, but it's really important to know that a committee isn't only about the people who are going to ask for money. There are some individuals who don't believe that they have the skill to ask another person to give a contribution, or they don't have a desire to do that. It's just not their comfort level. And that's okay, because you're going to need an individual or individuals on your committee who will help you do marketing, who might help you tell your story on your website or in your bulletin. You would have people who maybe would have an expertise or an interest in developing what the recognition opportunities will be. Someone that might, when you're ready, decide how are you going to recognize the donors in the building? Are you going to put a plaque next to each new room? Are you going to create a tree of life that has on it the men and women who are giving to this campaign? So while of course fundraising is important, I don't want anyone to feel that they would be left out. There might be an individual, who, for example, who doesn't feel that he or she can ask people for money, but they would say to you, I'm going to bring together 10 key people in my home for a dessert reception with the president and the rabbi to talk about the vision of this campaign. So there's a role beyond fundraising. When you look at the goal, it's going to be important to see how the capital campaign factors into everything else that you're doing. So for example, when a person's asked to give to this capital campaign, it's going to be over and above, of course, their dues, their annual dues. But if you have an annual fundraiser and you know that every year, for example, you need through a dinner, through a Yom Kippur appeal, however you raise money, you're going to need to guarantee that those monies are still raised, because you're going to still need those monies. Those monies might pay salaries. They may, pay for, if you bring a kiddush and whatever your expenses are, it needs to be factored in that you're still going to need that money, and that you're going to probably go to some of the same people who, make a very generous gift at the Yom Kippur appeal, who are also going to be asked to make a capital campaign gift. And one question you'll decide is, having this new building, will that necessitate an increase in your dues structure? So you're going to go to people, let's say if your building is completed in 18 months, and say your annual dues or your seats for the high holidays cost X, but now it's gonna be over and above that. And based on what your campaign goal is, you will need to determine when you will need the payment of these pledges. For example, and I don't know your numbers yet, but let's say you're going to an individual and asking that individual to give you $100,000. Are you going to, if you go to that individual and say that we're going to ask you to pay that gift over a 3-year period, that's an easier ask, because you're not asking them for $100,000 cash. You're asking them to give you 33 whatever thousand every year. But you would need to know if that's okay for you to see those monies come in, not all in the first year, but in year 2 and year 3. And one thing is also is, when you look at your goal, you can determine, because you know the people in the synagogue and I don't know them, can you, trying to think of the word, I lost the word for a minute, but can you assign, that's not the right word, but can you go to all your current members and say, there's a building fund commitment that's for everyone. We're asking every member to give X amount of money towards the building. Of course, there will be exceptions of people who can't do that. And for you to also consider that there are many people 2, 3, 5, and 7 years from now who are going to benefit from this new building. So you might want to think of, when a person joins the synagogue, will you ask them to make a capital campaign gift? Right now, because I'm living temporarily in Deerfield Beach in Century Village, because I had sold my home in Aventura, when I joined the synagogue here, and I joined after the building was built, I made a capital campaign gift because my parents lived here, but I wasn't a member. When I did join, I was assigned a capital campaign gift, even though the building was already here, because I was going to benefit from that. So you'll know if that's something that you can do as well. Once you know what your goal is, it will be important to create a graphic, an architectural rendering, and outline what are the dedication opportunities in the building. The Aron, the Ner Tamid, naming the sanctuary, if there's going to be a social hall, and being able to assign a cost to everything that will allow you to achieve your goal. And once you have that rendering and you know what your goal is, I can help you with some of the pricing of what I think is realistic to ask individuals, to give for those various dedications. And one of the things that really works very well in a capital campaign is creating one or two what I call affinity groupings. I personally and professionally am not into seeing a plaque on every door. It's just, because one of the reasons is because there are some things that are quote unquote sexier. I think, if you ask a person to dedicate the main sanctuary, with all due respect to your beloved rabbi, that might be sexier to some people than having the rabbi's office with their name on it. So I like the idea of doing dedication on a central plaque. And what I did in each of the 3 campaigns, we created what we called a mezuzah society, so that we asked people to give a certain amount of money to dedicate one of the mezuzot in the building, and we were able to sell many more mezuzot than we had doorways, because they weren't, other than the front door and maybe the door to the main sanctuary, all the mezuzot were the same, and people liked that level of recognition. One of the things I think that I also can help you with your lead is developing a prospect list. Who are the people in the congregation that you're going to go to first? You may have in mind already what I call a lead gift. The person who's going to be asked to make the first gift, which will be rather significant, that will set the tone for other people. It could be that, depending on who that individual is, you might suggest to them that they provide a match, that they will give you, let's say, $100,000, but they'll match gifts to that level to inspire other people to give. Or they might do it as a challenge. I will give you $250,000 if you raise $250,000.
Only whenever you can.
Dollars.
Okay.
It's important that
Have a good one.
that I mentioned to you that I don't believe that it's ever an insult or inappropriate to ask a person for a very significant gift if it's done in an appropriate way. For example, no one on your team is going to go to a person and say, Simon, I see the way you live, I see the way you travel, we're expecting $100,000. Of course, that's not going to happen. But if you believe that a person has a capacity to give, and they're asked because of their leadership, their history in the congregation, their love of Jewish life, if they're asked in a very appropriate way, even if they say no or they don't come to that, they do feel honored. And in my experience, sometimes we say no for a donor. We think, for example, that Simon doesn't have the capacity to give $100,000. So we as a committee decide that we're not going to ask him. I don't think we should ever say no for a donor. If you think that there's an individual who really has the capacity to make a very significant gift, if they're asked in an appropriate way, in an honorable way, they won't be insulted even if they don't come up with that number. I just wanted to say that at the University of Miami campaign, and we were at a point that for the Hillel House that, we hit a point where we weren't sure if we were going to get to the last million. And someone on the committee suggested that we look at an alumni list of people who went to the university. And we were looking at the list. We were looking actually at people who went to the law school. And the chairman of the campaign turned to me and she said, Simon, you know this individual very well in the community, so I think that you should ask. And I initially said no. I said, I solicited this person for the Miami Beach JCC. I solicit them for the Federation. I solicit them for the Holocaust Memorial. Enough. They said, fine. And I think that my answer bothered me. And about a week later, I was in the lobby of a medical arts building waiting for a doctor's appointment. And I called this individual and I told him the story. I said, Michael is his first name. I was at a meeting. Someone suggested I call you because you are a generous man. I didn't know that you went to law school at UM. And I told him I didn't think that I could ask you because every time you hear from me, I ask you for something. But I realized, Michael, by not asking you, I was saying no for you. And he said, tell me about the campaign. And over the phone, he gave me $25,000. So
Wow.
I think that, you know, it's important not to say no for someone. In your creating that list of people who you think are prime prospects, I think there's an issue of kavod or honor in a capital campaign that you may have one or two people who you have to go to first, to what I call a first right of refusal. You know, this may not be true, but I'm going to give the example. You know, the founding president of a synagogue, the person whose vision it was to create the synagogue, they might feel that they were looked over if they weren't asked to participate. And that might be an individual. It could be a family member of a founding member who unfortunately passed away, but you still have a relationship to the family, and maybe they would like a dedication. Maybe they'd like their parents or their brother or sister's name to be prominent in this synagogue because they helped to create that. So I call that first right of refusal, and people feel honored. People feel honored if they're asked. I would suggest that you do a number of personal meetings, Dory and the rabbi, let's say, with each of you and others, where you sit and you develop a prospect list. Not everyone, of course, who's a current member is going to be able to give a significant gift, but you may have people who can open the door for you to other people. So not knowing a lot about the demographics of your community, you may want to think of businesses or corporations or community leaders who are not members of your synagogue who would support you, because having a vibrant synagogue helps them build the Jewish community. So there may be philanthropists who are involved in your federation or other organizations who may be members of another synagogue, a temple, but are philanthropic and might feel that they want their name at some level with your synagogue. I would look at former members. I'd look at members who unfortunately have passed away, and you have a relationship or a link to their family members in other communities. You know, if this was a day school campaign, you know, I would say to you, look at your children, look at the children who go to school and go to their grandparents. Well, for you, are there family members of former members or current members who live in other communities and are philanthropists? In every campaign I did, I'm thinking of the Miami Beach JCC, there were board members and members of the agency who had the potential and did give nice gifts, who went to family members who were philanthropists. We got a $500,000 gift at the JCC from an individual who lives in New York and Greenwich, Connecticut, whose roots were on Miami Beach. And it meant something for this family to name something in the JCC for their father who had owned hotels on Miami Beach. Two other points, and then I'll open it up. When you develop the prospect list, it doesn't have to be the definitive list, because what you're going to find is that once you really begin this campaign and people, you know, drive by, or you bring people there and they see paintbrushes and they see bricks coming in and they see an architectural rendering, there are some people who like to come on board when they know it's real. You know, there's some people that are somewhat skeptical. You know, I don't know if you guys are really going to make this happen. Come to me, you know, when you have 3 or 5 other gifts. So you might be able to add those people on your prospect list, not as your #1 prospect. One of the things that's really exciting to me about a capital campaign, and I know that you're going to be talking about a renovation of a building, not taking a property and just building a brand new building, but there still is an opportunity to do what, you know, hard hat tours, you know, to take people into a building. When we did the University of Miami Hillel campaign, the architect who was a board member when I started my assignment, he took me to see the building, and it was, you know, it's just a frame of a building, a lot of concrete, a lot of wires hanging with lights. And we went in, and he said to me, Simon, I'm going to ask you to be quiet when we go in. I don't want you to disturb the students. And he pointed to a place, and he created for me this picture of students that were sitting with laptops studying. He helped me envision, and you will be able to do that. You know, you'll be able to go in and say, this is the space where on, you know, Wednesday morning, the rabbi is going to be giving a Chumash class. You can help people envision. There are people who get really excited. And often when we took people into a facility and showed them the raw structure, we decided not to have an ask in mind, but rather to ask them. I went with the JCC director on Miami Beach on a hard hat tour, and we went into a gymnasium, but the area of the gymnasium, and we talked about the basketball league. And the man that we took in there started to tear up, got very emotional. And he said, you probably don't know this about me, but I was raised in the Bronx. My father died when I was a young boy. My mother was a single parent with 3 children. If it had not been for playing basketball at the Bronx YWHI on the Grand Concourse, I might never have identified Jewishly. So we had a number in mind. We didn't ask him. We said, you know, we see that you're very moved. What were you thinking of doing to name, if you would name this gym? We were going to ask him for $100,000. He came forward with $250,000. So sometimes we really don't know what the motivation is, and bringing people there makes that happen. Lastly, I would say that in your campaign going forward, one of the things that I do professionally, and of course my work with you going forward and today isn't, I mean, it's professional because I'm a professional, but it's because my relationship to Dory and my love for the synagogue, you know, I'm coming to you as a volunteer. But one of the things that I really enjoy is solicitor training. A lot of people feel that they can't ask someone for a gift, but I can work with you and them in helping them know how to get an appointment. What are the skills, the discussion they have that would encourage a person to say, yes, David, yes, Sandy, I'll meet you for breakfast. I'll talk to you about the synagogue campaign. And also how to deal in those conversations with the people who are going to be the naysayers, the people that are not going to be as excited as you. And that's something we can do at a later time. So I know I gave you, as they say, a lot, but I just wanted to kind of lay out things for you to think about. I'm going to send Dory, and I'll let you disseminate the outline. But if there are questions now that you want to ask amongst yourselves that I can help you with, I would be happy to do that.
Simon, thank you very much. I think that we have a lot to digest with your suggestions. I apologize for not asking how your mom is doing. The last time we were scheduled, unfortunately, your mom had a stroke, and she's been on my Tehillim list, and
Thank
I
you.
could give the name to the rabbi, in fact. We
Thank
hope
you.
she's doing better.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster. My mother is Kanahara, 97 years old. And she has led the most incredibly beautiful, successful, healthy life. So like, man plans and God laughs. I saw her one evening, she was perfect, and the next morning she had a stroke. So she was in Broward North, I think it's called, in Deerfield Beach. And then she moved to Boca Raton to a rehab. And over the weekend, she had some issues, and she went to Boca Regional Hospital. And today she's being discharged and going back to rehab. So it's, it's a roller coaster. It's day to day, but we are still cautiously optimistic. I said to the rehab, we're not expecting our mom to jog out of there, but we would like her to go home as she was before the stroke. I think people do much better in their own home, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And my mother has, not only does she have great-grandchildren, I think you know the story, my mother has 18 great-great-grandchildren.
Great. Oh, wow.
So thank you. She's doing, and I think that someone
Great.
asked if they could ask. Oh,
Yeah,
is that the rabbi?
Yes, that's me. So I didn't mean to interrupt you talking about your mother. I'm glad to hear that.
No, but I'm thank you. I got through that.
Okay, so thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative. I really like the idea about taking people, in our case, it's well, I suppose I should be careful what I say when you tell people you're going to a funeral chapel. We could have an event there, and perhaps we could deck it out to look like a shul. So instead of sending a picture of what it could look like, we could put an Oren Kodesh in there, obviously a basic one. I'm not talking, you're not going to spend money to make it look beautiful. You could put the chairs, you could somehow get a BIM, and then you make an event and people come and you say, this is what we could have. This is what we are looking for. This is what we are aiming for. So I think that could be an excellent idea for us and our shul. A couple of questions, if I may.
Great idea.
Yeah. So I think that's certainly, if we have like a launch party, or we have something, that's certainly the place to do it. A couple of questions. Number one, in terms of secrecy and privacy. So at the moment, it's just a select, people know, of course people know, but at the moment, it's a select group of people on this meeting, and there's a few others who are working on this, and we're trying to keep it quiet. What is your view on letting people know? When do we let people know? Should we have a big meeting? Should we meet people first privately? What's the usual way of handling that kind of thing?
Well, I don't know, in your process, I imagine you need to get or have board approval to move forward.
Right.
And I would have a lot of the information available or known before you bring people together. I think you need to have a goal. You need to know how much we have to, because people are going to ask those questions. And when you put all that together and you feel that, that you're prepared to share, then I would do that. But I think you need to, I guess I had a brief conversation with Dory, but I think you need to know, yes, we're able to purchase this. This is the purchase price. This is what an architect said we would need. And it could be in stages. You may decide that the building is so expensive that, that maybe you're going in there and you're saying there's going to be an empty space. There's going to be a place for a kitchen, but we're not going to do the kitchen in the first. You could do it in phases.
Right.
There are things that you have to have a main sanctuary. You may feel that if you want to have a library, that the library doesn't have to be you'll decide, because it could be done in, because you're going to own the building. So it could be done in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. But I think I think people are going to they're going to rely on you or have an expectation that you know what you need to raise and when it needs to be raised. And I think that your idea of a launch, and you're right, you don't have to spend a lot of money. They can come into a room and you can have an artist on one wall give you a beautiful, very large poster of an Aron, and on another wall a bookcase. You could really dress up a very basic place, not spending a lot of money.
Right.
And I think it would be very creative, extremely creative, and it would create a sense of excitement for people.
And the other question I have, if you may, before other people ask, is I'm young and I'm thinking long term, right? Because I'm young and that's how it is. But a lot of people in our communities, for want of a better word, are not thinking long term, and perhaps maybe are thinking more day to day. So when you talked about the future and what it brings me, they may not be seeing the big picture. You say we want a community we want to build, and some people just are not interested. So how would you say we should approach that issue within our community about showing the value long term when people are not thinking necessarily long term?
Right. Okay. And you're right. I think that I would say to those, and this is without a lot of thought, but I think I would say to those individuals, I would remind them what the synagogue means to them today and what it has provided for them while they're living in your community, and how they're contributing to the campaign will ensure that when individuals now come to the community, they're going to find what they didn't find when they first came.
Right.
And I guess I would appeal to them for, that their name could be there as part of part of their legacy. Because you're right, there are some people that may say, listen, I don't know what benefit I'm really going to have because I should live and be well, but I'm not thinking of the next 25 years, and I'm not going to be raising a family here. Is there a potential in your community when you have this larger facility? Are there people who conceivably could come there with either children?
Definitely. There is a young family that moved in. They live 2 miles away, and they told me that they have friends who want to come, but the friends don't want to come, A, unless other people want to move in at the same time, but B, unless there's something on Shabbat, there's an event in the shul, there's a place their kids can go and play, because otherwise, like at the moment with me and my kids, they're stuck bored all day on Shabbat. So definitely when there is a space that people can use and play and have more like a community center type shul, then people have in Boca and other areas that are desperate to have a house that they can afford, are desperate to move in. That's what I've heard from several people. But it's all about having the facility to attract them in, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, because I'll tell you, the synagogue that I was a member of when I lived in Aventura is the Young Israel of Aventura. It's a storefront synagogue.
Yeah, I know it well. Yeah.
And one of the real issues and why young people left the community is because when they brought their children on Shabbat, a 5 and a 7-year-old cannot often sit with their mother or father for an entire service.
Yeah.
There was nowhere to do a story hour where a man or woman would go and read a book to children. So if in your plan in the building, you would, you don't have to provide 7 classrooms, but you can really say to people, yeah, we're going to do that. And when you come to shul on Shabbat morning, we don't even have to hire someone. Dory and I we lived in a community where our friend Lee Saul, a member of the congregation, went out for an hour every Shabbat morning and did a story hour. I mean, it's legendary, the kids who went. So I think the rabbis are really on target. This is the time, because in communities like Boca Raton and in Hollywood, 2 communities that I'm very familiar with because I have family and friends there are no homes. I have a friend who's looking for a house in Hollywood, a young couple with 2 young kids, and their realtor said, before you even see the house, I want you to put in a bid at the asking price, because by the time you get there, it's not going to be there. So if you believe that you have condominiums, apartments, townhouses, private homes that are going to be walking distance. All you need is 3 or 4 couples to say they're going to do it. They'll bring other people. And I think that, again, for some of the people who are not looking long-term, 5, 10 years in the future, they will be most of them will be very excited to see young people coming in. People, in the Young Israel of Deerfield, which is a major congregation, but an elderly community, people are very excited when they see grandchildren coming in and young kids leading Anim Semiros and having a young boy be asked to read from the Torah because it's his parsha and his grandfather says, my grandson's coming. People love that. And Rabbi, because you are a young rabbi with a young family, I think people will resonate because they're also thinking that you're not running away anywhere, meaning you see that there's a future for you and your family. So definitely. And when you do your campaign case and when we talk about solicitor training, we will address some of those issues of the people who are going to say, listen, I'm here 4 months during the winter. I live in Chicago. I live in Indianapolis. I give in that community. I'll pay my dues. I'll give you money when I get an aliyah, but that's it. Some of those people, and it's going to be okay if some of those people feel that way, but there are people who can be encouraged to think differently.
Right. Thank you.
Simon, if the rabbi is finished, Simon, I have a couple of questions. Does it matter how much the chairman himself or herself gives as part of the campaign?
No, because what you want is you want capacity. So for example, I'm just going to throw out a number. There are individuals who might contribute $5,000, and that $5,000 may represent to them what 100% means to another individual, because we know that everyone has their own capacity. I believe that a person who isn't a major donor, and I mean major only in the number, I believe, for example, in our campaign, I do a lot of soliciting, but I'm talking about soliciting my peers also, not donors. I can solicit a peer who gives more money than I do because I know what the quality of my gift is. I know what it represents in my life. So the only issue is when you have a person who has tremendous capacity and people know that, because I know it's judgmental, but we do judge our friends by their, if the person who goes on safari and spends $25,000, it says something about them, right? So if they're giving you $5,000, it's hard for them to ask people, to do more than that. But again, I'm sure you'll have people, who will make a gift that's not $100,000, that's not $25,000, but it really represents, it represents something. And so they can ask, because there are people that have, people who have an energy and a passion that's worth a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. And then I have another question. How productive is it to go out of the community, to go outside the congregation, to I don't know, somebody from West Orange, for instance, maybe there's someone there who's a millionaire. How important is that, and how I don't know, important, but how realistic is that to go to somebody like Robert Kraft or well, he passed away, Sheldon Adelson or something like that? How
well, it's productive if there's a relationship.
Oh.
Meaning, again, the appeal of a synagogue, it has a limited appeal. It's, if we were talking about breast cancer research, you can go to almost anyone because, that's unfortunately an illness, an issue that has touched many people. So, but it is realistic if, I'll give you an example. You might have a member who has a relative in another community, who's a single person, a very wealthy person, who's not young and is thinking about legacy giving. You know, they don't necessarily have, they have a very nice estate and they don't really have people to give it to or organizations. So you know what, people give to people. Early on in my career, Senator Frank Lautenberg of blessed memory, you know, he was from our community, Dory, and but he was a national leader. And we had a dinner in someone's home who was a major donor, and it was for individuals who gave a minimum of $100,000. So the host, we needed to do a special campaign that had, I mean, it had a lot to do with it, but it was only for Israel. And it was a campaign where you were asked to make a gift payable over 5 years. So over cocktails, Frank Lautenberg said to the host, you know, later tonight when we do fundraising, we're going to ask people to give their annual campaign gift, and then we're going to ask them to give a gift to the special campaign for Israel. And you know what? My wife and I are going to do it. I would like for you and your wife to do it. Now, in those days, because we're going back a long time, we did what was called card calling. We sat in a room and we said, Dory, you know, Simon's giving 50,000. Dory, what are you giving? And Dory would, and it's unheard of today, but it really worked. So Frank Lautenberg said, on behalf of myself and his then wife, Lois, of blessed memory, Lois and I are going to give our gift of 100,000 to the annual campaign. And for the special campaign for Israel, we're going to give. They call on the host and he says, going to give $100,000 with my wife. And Frank mentioned to me over cocktails the importance of this campaign, and we're going to do it. He didn't even know what the campaign was about. He did it because he respected Frank Lautenberg. So absolutely, if there are people in other communities that you have relationships with, I don't know the Delray community that well, but I'm sure there are major philanthropists that have nothing to do with you, who give to the Federation there, or if you go to the closest JCC or the day school and you see on their wall of honor. I mean, people who name institutions don't always live or necessarily relate to that institution. And there might be corporations, law firms, businesses that would feel that building a Jewish community, not only is it important to them, but it serves them well. So, you know, if they're, again, let's say that you weren't buying this piece, you know, you were buying an office building and not a mortuary. If that mortuary would really wanted to look to their future, you know, you might have been able to go to them and say, you know, we're building a synagogue. We would really like to have your name. We would really like you to be one of the donors for a mezuzah. I mean, it sounds morose, but it would speak well to them because it's their business. So definitely when you do, that's the beauty of doing a prospect list. People might say, you may be thinking amongst yourself, I don't know who, I don't have anyone, but when we look through our contact list, we look through what was our Rolodex, we come up with people that might really want to be part of a legacy campaign. And that's what I was thinking about, people who were really touched by your community who unfortunately passed away. You know, do you know, probably some of you know who those people are in the communities that they come from. Okay, they're not going to give you $1 million, but if you went to them and said to them, you know, we're doing a campaign where we're asking individuals to get $18,000 payable over 2 years for a mezuzah, would you, you know, this congregation was important to your mother and father. Would you dedicate a mezuzah? And you give them a realistic number. When we did University of Miami Hillel, we went to former parents of students who were really touched by Hillel at a time when there wasn't a building. We got gifts from Toronto. We got gifts from all over the United States and Canada, from people that, you know, that wanted to be recognized. And one of the things that I didn't mention, but I should have mentioned, is that once you start getting these gifts, it's really important to engage those people. So let's say your campaign is going to run over 18 months, because you're not going to do this campaign in a month, right? During that time, it's really important for those people to have status updates. And a status update, by the way, can be in the bulletin. It doesn't have to be a brochure. But maybe after the campaign is going 6 months and you have your first 12 donors, you bring them together for breakfast, or you bring them together for a special study session with the rabbi, where at that time they're kind of recognized as donors. When we did the Miami Beach JCC campaign, we were picking up a campaign that had been dormant for 5 years. There were people that didn't want to pay their gifts because they said, we made the gift 5 years ago. You never told us what was going on. So it's really important to do what we call to steward our donors, and just to make them feel really important. Yes.
Yeah, you had mentioned that we should set a goal. The problem we have is that we have to find what the price is going to be and the cost of whatever the renovation and so on. But the impression I get is that we're going to have the money available because the people will want to close quickly. So how do we set an amount where we really have no more than a hazy ballpark figure of what it's going to take? You have any ideas on that?
Well, I guess I would start with, what do you think the building's going to cost you? So I'm just going to throw out a number. If the building's going to be $1 million, and you now ask, the architect or someone that you're going to hire to do your renovations, give us a ballpark. That's how you come up with a number. And I would always shoot high, because then you have a contingency. It's not like, oh, we needed to raise $1 million, but then we realized it was $1.5 million. I think that I would think you could come up with a number that would be realistic enough. It doesn't have to be the exact number.
So in other words, if what I'm hearing is that if we think it's going to be, let's say, between $1 and $3 million, we should aim for 3.2.
Yeah, definitely.
Or
Definitely.
3.6 or something.
But what is your first name?
Sam.
I'm sorry, it's
Sam. Hi,
Sam.
Sam.
That's the husband.
So Sam, no, I know you're the husband. One of the things, though, you said, though, light bulb went off in my head. It could be when it comes to some of the furnishings of the building that you may get some in-kind donations. Does someone in your congregation, for example, know someone that, owns a company that does beautiful chairs and tables? Someone who their family member owns a carpet company.
Right.
You might get some in-kind donations that you can recognize, where it really works for it's easier for the person to give you 250 chairs than to give you the gift, because you would be buying them at retail and they're giving to us wholesale.
Yeah.
So that could help you with the furnishings.
Benefit.
And I don't know, I don't know how big this facility is going to be, but keep in mind that if you do a kitchen, even if it's not in the first phase, you might have a local caterer who might say, I'd like you to only use me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we did at the Miami Beach JCC, a caterer paid for the kitchen. And again, not knowing the architectural rendering yet, you could look, as it relates to the maintenance of the building, if you have I know you're not going to have you're not going to have an enormous social hall, but given the needs of the community, is the social hall something that people in the community would want to rent when you're not using it? And of course, abide by your, kashrut and Shabbat. Is there someone who lives in the community that wants to make a 50th wedding anniversary dinner, or someone that, and as the rabbi said, when you have younger people, are there people in the community that are going to want to rent that facility, for a dinner, dance, or a wedding? University of Miami Hillel, a lot of their budgetary needs, because it's a magnificent facility. I mean, it's an architectural beauty. They raise thousands and thousands of dollars on a monthly basis, allowing the community to use it.
Right, but that's under the operating once the deal
No,
is
no, I'm
done.
just saying, but that might help you in your goal setting, not have to build in so much of that.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And also in the whole dedication, when you look at affinity groupings of people that give the mezuzot for the building, maybe you have someone that wants to underwrite a Sefer Torah. And, not only are you paying for the Sefer Torah dedication, but you build into it a real cost so that maybe that person is also making a gift to the synagogue.
Right.
So, I mean, those are the kinds of things.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions? David, I saw your hand up earlier. Do you have anything?
No, my question was not too different from the one that was just asked. I was thinking that if, say, for a bulk, given that we've got a synagogue of less than 100 family members, I believe, or certainly not much more, combination of family members and single members, when taken as an account unit, it's probably in the vicinity of 100, 110 maybe. What amount, and I personally don't know anybody that is very wealthy, about what percentage of the money should be kind of dedicated, known donors would put up before you open up the campaign to everybody?
David, you're gonna have to get.
I
Well,
know.
I think that's
I've got to get
gonna.
off the phone, so get
Okay,
off.
but okay, I'll just say to the others, that's really contingent on what do you need to raise. But I would ask you to think, and I know you're thinking, I mean, you were thinking of it, David, but if others are thinking of it as well, I'm hoping that, after this call, you're going to jot down for yourself like 3 or 4 people that you really think could make this happen for you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Harry and Judith, we don't have your video, but is there a question you want to raise? Because we can't see your hand being raised.
Excuse me for one moment. I've got to sign off, but I've transferred the host to Sandy. Sorry about that, but.
Okay,
David, thank you for
your
David,
help.
thank you for making this happen with the technology.
Okay, bye. I'll catch it later.
Okay, Harry, do you have any comments to make, questions to ask?
I don't. No, I don't, because there's a lot of things that are very significant in what he said. So I think it's time for us to digest it. For one of the things that I had, and he answered my question, is that I don't think he answered this particular one. What happens if you know of a person who has a lot of money, but has an unsavory reputation? Is that person somebody that you would approach to make a donation to the synagogue?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends, but I think that my general answer would be that you really would want to stay away from a person that, that you're not going to be proud to have their name on your building. But it's so hard, because you never want to be judgmental. I mean, if a person, I think you have to do it case by case, but I wouldn't make them your top prospect. Because when a person goes into the main sanctuary, and it's the Simon Kaminetsky main sanctuary, you want to kind of feel they're going in the hush of a person, someone that that you really respect. Yeah, I guess though it may be, I don't know if it's a hidden question there. It could be that you have someone in mind that really can be your lead gift, but you don't want them to be your lead gift. That would be problematic. But you could work on that. There's a way of working. There's a gray area between black and white.
I realize that there is a gray area between black and white, and that's why I'm asking a question, because I think that there is a possibility of getting a large sum of money from this particular family. And I think that their reputation has been sullied to an extent, but I don't think that it is something that cannot be overcome.
Yeah,
It's
because
not Madoff as an example.
yeah, no, because but also this could be an opportunity for them to do something that's so beautiful that it will overshadow.
Make us a chus for them. Yes, I know what you mean.
No, but really, I mean, one of the beautiful things, and I mean, the rabbi would tell you this. I'm not a rabbi, but you know, we go through times in our life. Our lives change. You know, there are people who never saw themselves being involved in the community, never saw themselves being generous. Maybe they weren't the kindest person at one point, but something happens in their life when they realize that there's an opportunity to, you know, to really step forward, and being embraced by the synagogue and by the leadership could really help them, could really, you know, we have donors in our federation, you know, who maybe 10 years ago, no one wanted to really approach them, but because of building a relationship with them, you know, again, the gray area is definitely something that you can entertain. And you'll know how to do that. You'll talk about it amongst yourselves with your rabbi. And, you know, I mean, we do know that you don't want to put a name on a building or a facility that one day you're going to take down. But
Yeah,
you know, I don't think you'll find.
That person has had their names on many structures, and now they've been taken off for no reason other than just words. So I think it's a wrong place to discuss it. I'd rather.
Well, you're gonna know best, because I don't know your, you know, I don't know your community. I mean, I know that we have a major philanthropist who just moved to Miami from another community, who really is probably he's a wonderful man, but he's very controversial politically. And, you know, some people have said that they would prefer, you know, when he comes up in a discussion, they say, I would prefer not to ask that person. You know, but I'm going to let you deal with that. And if I can be helpful without knowing the individual, of course, and never knowing you need to know the name. But I think internally you can discuss that.
Okay. I appreciate what you said, and it will be done privately. Thank you. No, I have no further.
Does anyone else have any questions? Judith, do you have a question? Oh, she's on mute, so whatever. Okay. Simon, thank you so very much. I think we learned a lot, and we have a lot more to learn and a lot to digest. And I look forward to receiving your outline, you said, so I could send it out to those who could not attend for whatever reason. And again, thank you so very much for taking the time.
I look forward to your next steps, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care. Nice to meet you.
Don't forget to stop the recording.
Yep, got it.
Right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.